you know, that's okay, Mr. Shakespearean peasant. What do you think about these hedgerows? The goddamn land enclosures, I hate the bastards. I mean, 400 years ago, the British populace loathed hedgerows. They were the acts of enclosure. Everybody hated them. And in fact, it was the guys who were enclosing the commons who actually had long-term vested interest in mind. Now there's a complete reversal, which is regular people like the hedgerows, and Sir Jeremy Pissbridges is absolutely happy to despoil all sorts of ancient monuments to build real estate when he wants. So there's actually a complete reversal on both sides of the issue. So the thing is, livability is labile. You only do livability until you say, oh, this doesn't seem a very good idea. Whereupon, they'll change the livability. So the issue is this: we want sustainable. We need to plan for sustainable. We need to code for it. We need to get more efficient. But as we get there, we have to always go through a path of livability. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of preaching, self-righteous, screeching greenies who aren't going to be effective. Now, I think it's important that some people should do that. But I think it's also important that we should get real. All sorts of wonderful things happen in Britain with regard to livability. For example, the people who lived in Epping Forest used to be able to lop the trees. That is, they could cut firewood from the forest. The Industrial Revolution was a pain in the butt for normal people because you had to buy coal. The great thing about wood is it was free. So people hated coal because you had to buy it. But Queen Victoria realised that Epping Forest was hopeless. I mean, these trees were about 10 feet tall at the most, and they had 400 years tree boles and nothing on top. So what she did was to buy for the people of Loughton Lopping Hall, and in exchange for Lopping Hall, which they still have and is a nice little community centre, and they've still kept it up to, which is nice. In exchange for that, they took away the lopping rights. As a result, the trees in Epping Forest are now bizarre, and all of a sudden, that's 150 years worth of growth since they stopped lopping. And so, you know, the government comes in and insists on things. And, you know, the acts of enclosure, the general populace knows that the government's going to rip things away from them unless they really work hard at it. Yes, as a result, all sorts of strange and bizarre things happen. I used to live on Whipps Cross Road, the North Circular Road of London. Before they built the M25, this was the road that all the big trucks went circled London. And it was a sort of two-lane, four-lane road, sort of a wide two-lane, so the buses could stop and the trucks could get past and that was it. So it's a busy road. If you owned 40 acres next to Epping Forest, you had open grazing rights. I mean, like Wyoming, like in London, open grazing rights. And damn, these cows would come across the road into my mother's garden, start eating the irises, she'd chase them out, and then it was screeching of brakes. So these herds of cattle came out across the four-lane highway. I mean, crazy, you know? I mean, some poor guy in 1977 was on a motorcycle in a London fog, and when they say can't see a hand in front of your face, that was literally true. Your hand disappeared. I mean, London fog, it's not sentimental. I mean, you know, naming overcoats after it doesn't make any sense to me. That was awful. So this guy hit a steer in Epping Forest, well, on the North Circular Road, on his motorcycle, and he died. It took 20 damn years. 20 years before they stopped that grazing going on. What else? My father was pharmacist of Whipps Cross Hospital. Whipps Cross Hospital serves 1,000 beds. And so it served the East Quadrant of London, really. And he was the hospital pharmacist. And when I was a small boy, there was a little track. And this little track allowed ambulances to come in and ambulances to leave. And it was probably about twice as long as this room is. It was nothing. Because it was cutting through a little nasty little remnant of forest. It didn't matter. It was a hopeless, stupid little piece of remnant forest. And then the real forest was across the road. Let me tell you about this track. 1,000 beds, serving east side of London. It was a one-track road. In other words, if an ambulance was coming out, the sick person in the ambulance couldn't get in. If there's an ambulance coming in, you couldn't send the ambulance out to get the dying sick person. It took 20 years of negotiation to cut down 3 goddamn trees, widen the road. So what happens then is that livability sort of lurches forward, and it's not always rational. But in the end, we're going to achieve sustainability, but have to realise that it's always going to be constrained by livability. You can't get people to behave responsibly until the price of gasoline forces them into some other posture. And so, the issue of livability is there, and it always wins. The nice thing about livability is it's labile and will always change. And as we change, we can then begin to perhaps get, at some point, some reasonable use of gasoline in America, but it won't come until gas is $15 a gallon. I mean, when the gas went suddenly, in a very short period, up to $4, yeah, SUVs were out then. But they're not completely out, and they're sort of coming back. And if we need to go up to $6 now and do it fast, because that'll get their attention. Nothing else will. They'll just get used to it. Oh, gasoline, Obama's fault. He's just sucking it down. That's the problem. It's you damn Prius drivers that's the problem. So the situation is much more complicated. The values in there are much more wrinkled. There are situations that you simply have to accept and then manage them anyway. Ought. Well, yeah, you can do that, and you can feel very self-righteous and green. But let's get real. Let's get real. And I think it's important that some people should hurl themselves on the spears. I mean, Hugh Iltis, my lovely, wonderful, screeching green colleague. I daren't tell him half the things I think. But I think it's important for him to be rattling everyone's cage. I mean, I speak like a Baptist minister. He's much worse than me. And so it's important that some people should be like that. But I think it's really helpful for the rest of us to sort of get real. You say, well, politicians ought. If politicians did what they ought, they wouldn't be politicians come to the next election, right? In which case, you'll get some bastard who did get elected. I mean, and don't underestimate. I mean, Republicans are people too, you know. I mean, Bill Cronin assures me that the Republicans leading the legislature here, because he has connections up and down State Street, they know that incarcerating people for drugs doesn't work. They know that. But the trouble is, they can't say that. Because they'll always see some wacko further out to the right who'll get elected instead of them if they start doing the reasonable thing. 1996, more money spent on prisons than there were spent on higher education. I mean, that's when the lines crossed. Don't think that's a good investment. Mind you, my wicked colleague John Sharpler said he gave Tammy Baldwin a good run for her money. Got within 1,000 votes before they gerrymandered the district. So he's not going to try anymore. But he said that the Republicans really know that it won't do any good, but they have to do it anyway because of their posturing, otherwise they won't get elected. And whereupon you need to be sort of sympathetic. You need to, when the system is corrupt, when populism is going to send inappropriate people, well, what are you going to do about that then? Because that's the problem. You can't deal with the fact that Republicans will be Republicans and will try to get elected. Furthermore, as they go to the right, the Democrats have to go to the right because otherwise they won't make it. And so then, these things are very counterintuitive. Be careful when you say ought. Republicans ought. Yeah, it'd be nice if they did, but they won't. And they won't be elected anyway if you did. So, the bottom line here is, let's get real. Stop getting sentimental. What can we do? What can't we do? Acknowledge where the system is corrupt, because it's corrupt in lots of places. Last thing in the world you want to do is to ask a scientist whether there's been enough research done so that we're sure about this or that pollution issue. No, they love it when the politician, when they say, well, we're uncertain, but if you give us more grant money, I mean, they're just whores, you know. If you give us more grant money, it'll be okay. And the politicians love it because they don't have to do anything. They put it up. There are therefore strategies. One of the strategies, I used to work on the Science Advisory Board for the guys who run the commission that runs the Great Lakes border, the International Joint Commission. Great guy. And they knew that Lake Erie was in serious trouble in the 70s. I mean, bad, serious trouble. And they said, we don't have all the evidence, but it sort of looks like it's phosphorus. And there's a lot of phosphorus, and it's in detergent. And they seem to have won that completely. I'm renting out my new farmhouse, and we were cleaning the other day, right? And Mr. Chang there was sort of scraping away. And I got trisodium phosphate, but it was phosphate free. So apparently they won. So that's the stuff that apparently really cleans walls very well. So what we did then, well, what they did before I got on the Science Advisory Board, they said, we're not sure. More research? No, we don't need more research. We can't settle this issue anyway. But we think it's phosphorus. So let's have a deadline. 1978, that's it. Unilever, it's done. And the way then to deal with that evil dance that scientists and politicians is make deadlines. And then the deadline came and they rolled it over, and damn, it didn't work too. I mean, you know, Lake Erie's in good shape now. It's a little confusing, that is to say zebra mussels seem to have, in a certain sense, improved the situation. So these things, there's always other funny things going on. So my bottom line is, livability, sustainability. The two are in a certain sense incompatible because one of them is unplanned and dynamic and the other one is planned and coded. The relationship between them is livability will always win, but sustainability is something that we still desperately need to do. But as we do it, don't get preachy, just get real. You had a question?
Yeah, when you're talking about getting real, it sounds to me what you were talking about earlier, which was your narrative. And the problem we have is in the narrative. The narrative is everyone use as much as you want, have as much as you can get as much as you can, make your family safe, go generationally, whatever, you know, get as much as you can.
Yes, they have an inappropriate narrative.
Right. That's the narrative.